Hello, Dr. Karp here, and welcome to my channel where my goal is for you to become your own authority in health so that you can make the proper decisions for optimizing your health for you and your family. And today we're going to be talking about the biological effects of pornography. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because people don't realize that there are actual biological effects to watching pornography. People don't quite understand the concept that just by seeing something, you can actually have changes inside the body. So we're going to start with explaining that and then ending with what I term protecting the gates. This is something that every world wisdom tradition has spoken about. The gates, of course, well, I'll leave that till the end, but basically we'll talk about a Buddhist example and then an example from the West. But ultimately it exists in all wisdom traditions. So let's talk about these step downs. I call them step down 1, 2, and 3 because they ultimately lead to a downward spiral. Now, it starts with the fake reward. Ultimately, when you're watching pornography, your brain thinks it's actually engaging in sex, which, I mean, if real, it makes sense that there would be dopamine release to make you feel pleasure. Unfortunately, with the release of dopamine, you get even greater ejaculation and greater dopamine with the ejaculation, and therefore there is even more dopamine. Unfortunately, we can characterize dopamine release into healthy and unhealthy, and one way we can look at the unhealthy, the negative, is that it can lead to that unfortunate downward spiral that can involve addiction. Now, even healthy types of things can be addictive. But one can see that full night's sleep, love, community, relationships, exercise, music, healthy diet, especially probiotic foods like sauerkraut and kimchi, meditation, prayer, qigong, tai chi, being outdoors, all of these, of course, if it's unlikely that you're going to have negative addictions to these sorts of things. However, from a negative perspective, where you get this massive release of dopamine, with pornography, cocaine, amphetamines, alcohol, nicotine, and some people, even THC, which is cannabis, can be associated with a type of withdrawal syndrome in the sense that there's abnormal craving of the cannabis. Regardless, I've spoken about cannabis in multiple other videos. I'll leave links below on that. And we can see that obviously one set is associated with a fulfilling life filled with rewards, greater rewards, and dopamine release. But this associated with dopamine release excessive that can lead to a downward spiral. Now, what's happening? Well, we've spoken about the step down 1, and that leads us to step down 2. After ejaculation, you get release of prolactin, and this is that refractory period that Masters and Johnson spoke about, that feeling of somewhat lack of sexual interest, but sort of a bliss, a feeling of relaxation. There's also a loss of zinc, and zinc balances out prolactin. But speaking about this particular period, unfortunately, with pornography, there is not as much prolactin released, and therefore it's less satisfying, ultimately speaking, than during intercourse. And therefore, it's just more physiologically speaking, much more satisfying to have traditional sexual activity without the use of pornography. Now, ultimately, again, this all doesn't sound all that bad, except that it leads to this feeling that you are regulating yourself, that there is some kind of emotional and physical self-regulation, that most people who have become addicted feel like they need to achieve, right, that feeling afterwards of sort of resetting the body, resetting yourself in a physical way. And one can become dependent on that feeling and its stimuli, which is the pornography. So it's leading to this sort of, in a drug sense, it would be resetting physiologically using a chemical. In the pornographic sense, it's using pornography, so a visual stimuli, in the exact same way as people are using those drugs to self-regulate physically and sometimes emotionally. And it has this in common with these negative inducers of dopamine. What are they? What's going on? Well, there's desensitization, which is, quote, hypersensitivity of the circuitry, In other words, it's abnormal craving, which is something that happens when people are on drugs, but it also happens for people that are using pornography. In other words, looking at it from outside, if you have ever known anyone who's either addicted to drugs or addicted to pornography, and they're honest about it, you can see it doesn't make rational sense, the abnormal craving that's going on. But when you understand what's happening from a biological sense, unfortunately, it does. And unfortunately, because this can lead to, real problems in people's lives. So we have desensitization, one of the hallmarks of drug addiction. Next is desensitization. So the more porn used, the less reward system activation. So you need more and more. And amazingly, this has been shown to have a reduction in gray matter of the reward system. What does that mean? That means your brain matter, your biology, your anatomy, I should say, of your brain has changed by watching pornography. And the ability for you to feel the honest to goodness positive rewards is going to be decreased. In other words, your ability to receive and get benefit from love, community, and relationships, exercise, music, healthy diet, meditation, prayer, being outdoors, none of this is going to feel all that great. And it can lead you to a blah, depressing kind of existence with desensitization. So it's spreading outward from the pornography to a whole host of other problems. The ability to fully appreciate all of these things. Next is dysfunctional prefrontal circuits, which basically leads to poor executive functioning. This can start to affect your job, your ability to make decisions, your willpower even can be decreased. And I saw this with a friend of mine in California many years ago who was addicted to pornography, and he just lost all willpower. He basically had inherited a lot of money, didn't have to work, and literally became addicted, so much so that he stopped the job that he had and pretty much was just watching pornography all day. It was very, very sad. Next is malfunctioning stress system. And, we have this part of our bodies that are there to handle our stress. And in this case, you get actually inflammation as well as changes in the gene. In other words, by watching pornography, your ability to handle stress on a genetic level based on the CRH gene is modified. So you're getting actual epigenetic, I should say. In other words, gene changes that are happening from either from the outside, from environmental issues, in this case, watching something, high oxytocin as a result of this, which can lead to oversensitivity, dysregulation, inability to handle your emotions properly, as well as inflammation of the brain and certain markers that are associated with increased disease as well. So here we have what's going on. All of these are really to be found in drug addiction and in pornography. References will all be below. Now, if that's not enough to scare you, many people speak about how this is sort of a modern type of issue. Most people talk about how, there wasn't pornography a long time ago, and therefore our brains are being hijacked by technology, by the availability of the internet. But ultimately, all wisdom traditions have talked about guarding the gates being, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, all the sense organs. And I'm just going to leave you with two little tales from the Eastern tradition and then one from the Western tradition. So the Buddhist found this, again, references all below. This is what happens, friend, with one whose sense doors are unguarded, who is immoderate in eating and not given to wakefulness, like that monk. As long as he lives, it will be impossible for him to maintain the holy life in all its fullness and purity. But if a monk guards his sense doors, again, the gates that we're talking about, is moderate in eating and given to watchfulness, then it will be possible for him, as long as he lives, to maintain the holy life in all its fullness and purity. And how, my friend, does one guard the sense doors? In this, a monk seeing an object with the eye does not seize hold of it, either its general appearance or its details, because anyone dwelling with the eye faculty uncontrolled could be overwhelmed by cupidity and dejection, evil and unwholesome states of mind. Therefore, he practices to control the eye facility, guards it, and gains control over it, so one guards the sense doors. Similarly with the ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. In the Western mystical tradition, in Deuteronomy 16:18, it says to appoint judges and police at all of our gates. And the mystics interpreted this the same way. They interpreted it, the deeper meaning behind this, as to guard the gates of the eyes, the ears, and the mouth. And this is another sort of tale, story, parable. The story is told of a disciple who came to his rabbi asking for advice on how to conquer his temptations. The rabbi told him to go visit a certain student in a certain place. Having reached the student's house on the edge of town, the disciple knocked on the door. He waited until late into the night, yet there was still no answer. He ended up spending the night, freezing cold, on the doorstep. When morning came, the student finally let the person in. The disciple explained that he had come to find out how to control his temptations. The student explained to him, "You see how I kept you waiting all night? This is my house. I decide when you come in, not you. This is how to control your animal nature. Make sure that whatever comes in does so because you wanted to let it rather than sneaking on its own terms." The story may be a little harsh, but the message is clear. Guard your gates and prevent, ultimately, real, lasting biological damage, biological change in your body. And I wish you luck if this is something that you are dealing with. There are a lot of resources for you. Some of the research that I found was found on a incredible, unbelievable website that you'll find the link to below. And that concludes my little video on the biological effects of pornography. If you received any value from this, please click the button that you liked it, leave a comment, and please do subscribe to see more videos summarizing various health topics. See you next time. Bye-bye.